Okay, I think we should get started. Welcome to the session OpenStory, a decoupled administrative interface for Drupal. I would first like to start by thanking our sponsors, the Diamond, the Platinum sponsors, and the Gold sponsors. Since it's the first session after the lunch break, I usually like to start with a small energizer. I please ask you all to put your phone down, and I will make a really simple exercise that will not require you to stand up. So on the count of 3, I want all of us to give a big clap. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, perfect. Now we are ready to start. So a short introduction about myself. My name is Adrian Pintilie. I'm CEO of Softescu, which is a Drupal shop based in Romania. I'm a Drupal developer since 2007, and I'm an avid supporter of Drupal and the Drupal community. I'm also one of the organizers and the founders of Drupal Hackcamp, which took first place this year in Bucharest. Throughout this session, I'm going to talk about the following points. I'll talk about the context, the decoupled world, the shift in the market, the Drupal role, the OpenStory, and I'll have some time for questions at the end. Some words about the context. I think we live in the world where for a while JavaScript was the poster of the internet. JavaScript was known for silly animation like putting raindrops or snowflakes on your screen, and it had its first breakthrough a couple of years ago with the implementation of Ajax. Since then, the lead has been taken by all these frameworks like Node.js in 2009, AngularJS in 2010, React in 2013, and then again in 2016 the Angular community realized they were doing some things wrong and rebranded and started themselves to work with a new approach. So what I can say is that for the past couple of years we are living in a world that I like to call it the JavaScript Renaissance. And all this JavaScript Renaissance has been basically started by these frameworks, which are actually a collection of libraries that are either using JavaScript or TrueScript to implement various functionalities in the front end. So let's have a look at this JavaScript Renaissance in a couple of numbers. So if we take the data for the past 2 years, that means active JavaScript installation over the web, we see that React has moved up to close to 2.5 million installation. Angular had a steady growth, and that bump that you see there is the switch they have made a couple of months ago from Angular 5 to Angular 6. Vue.js had a steady, I would say, presence on the market, and of course, maybe you are curious about Drupal, it had a steady, slightly declining line comparing with the evolution of the other frameworks. And all this data, by the way, I took it from npm threads and from Drupal.org. So what I want to say is that it's not really about the number, but it's about the trend. So if you combine all those JavaScript frameworks numbers in one graphic line, you obtain a slightly line that goes upwards. And if you look for the Drupal, we are kind of going a bit down. So furthermore, if you look over the internet and if you Google PHP versus Node.js or PHP versus JavaScript, you might end up finding this article on Quora that has been posted in August 2014. And if you have the curiosity to open the article, you will notice that since then it has been read by over 500,000 visitors. Furthermore, if you look on the job market on PHP versus JavaScript, you'll notice that, for example, on a search that I did a couple of days ago, there were about 150 jobs on PHP, close to 400 jobs for Angular, over 500 jobs for React, and some small jobs, a few small numbers of jobs on Vue.js. Again, this data is public. I use monster.com and I use the typical Silicon Valley city, San Francisco. If we compare PHP with Ruby, JavaScript, and Java as a whole, you'll notice that again on the job market, the trend is more in favor of the Ruby, JavaScript, and Java rather than PHP in general. So why do I say this? Well, my opinion is that PHP is losing traction both on usage and fresh talent. If we look on the market, a typical web content management market will be probably structured like this. You have the high-end tier, you have a middle tier, and you have a bottom tier. The high-end tier, I put the mark about €1 million in value of the project, and the bottom tier at about 10,000 euros for the project. Typically, the high-end tier, it's, I would say, the place for a project done with Adobe Experience Manager or Sidecore. Some of these costs, or the high cost of these projects, come obviously from license fees. The bottom tier, I think it's used by WordPress and static sites, and they form the highest majority of the internet sites that are out there. And the Drupal and some other CMSs are staying comfortable on the middle tier. However, in the past 2 years, we have noticed in our market approach that the bottom tier has moved up. And while the high-end tier stayed the same for Adobe, Sidecore, or SharePoint, the bottom tier is being moved up and has been taken over by software as a service. And there are those kind of projects where companies can pay a monthly flat fee and have a wide range of functionalities that are extended every month. So while the bottom tier moves up, and the average size of project that now have to be taken and made from custom code or open source CMSs is raising up to 100,000 euros, I would say the Drupal and the others who are staying in the middle, I think they are being squeezed by SaaS, while on the top side, Drupal is not being able to grow as fast as the other platforms. On the market segmentation for Drupal, if you go to a typical DrupalCon, you will see tracks that are focused on the personas, and we have in Drupal what I will call the hobbies. We have the small and medium-sized enterprises that use Drupal. We have the NGOs, the higher education, and the enterprise market. On the hobbyist side, I think Drupal has lost some of them when we made the switch from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8, and mainly that's because we have implemented object-oriented programming in Drupal, which is something not very easy to learn for people that are past their peak career in development. And also with the implementation with Twig, we asked the typical hobbyist to learn another technology in order to be able to develop his site on Drupal. On the small and medium-sized enterprises, as I've previously explained, I think we are losing them slowly to software as a service. We are still doing okay on NGOs and higher ed, and the enterprises, we are start to lose them to the decoupled world. So if you look on a typical corporate portal side where you have, for example, some products listed there, you have a news, you have events, and you made this in a corporate side probably with Drupal, and I'll call this all in inclusive world. In the decoupled world, what happens is probably you are going to have a product information management system that stores your products. You are probably want to create a portal that is going to store the news content on the site. And then you have your products loaded through web services from the product information management system. And probably you are going to also have an intranet that is going to list some events. And those events probably are going to be pushed to the corporate portal site, and the news are going to be read and the product information system from the other platforms. So if you look to all this, to this architecture for a project, it kind of makes sense. Furthermore, what we've noticed in the market is, for example, if you are a company that has an intranet which has been done in 2010, probably in SharePoint, and then you have a legacy application done with custom code let's say in 2005, and now your users are asking you for a more modern application. What happens is that what you can do now is just you stick some web services on top of this legacy application, you add a modern UI done with Angular, React, or Vue.js, and bam, you have a new application, and the end user doesn't know that it's actually a legacy code behind, which has been revamped with a modern UI. So what point I want to make is that organizations have a legacy burden, and some of the application that in the past clients would use to come to us to make that product or that project from scratch in Drupal, now they find that it makes sense for them to reuse some of the legacy code and just stick a modern UI on top of it. So if you are a developer or a Drupal agency and a client comes to you and asks to make a decoupled project, probably you are going to architecture that project in the following way. You are going to have a backend system that is actually your content repository. You are going to add some web services to it that is going to expose that content to more than UI done with Angular. And I like to call this approach a two-stack approach. However, in reality, we have a much more diverse approach. So you have your content repository, you have your web services and the model UI, and probably you will not have to use the backend because that backend already exists either through a custom legacy application or from a different system. You are just going to use the web services and build as a developer or as a company just the front end with the JavaScript. And this is the one stack approach. Then the second approach, as I already explained, the two stack approach. And there is another way of building decoupled application. You add the middleware, which is usually done nowadays with Node.js, and again you have the front end, and this is the three stacks approach. And most probably, if you work for a really large organization and really large clients, you have a multi-stacks approach where you are integrating different backend systems and you are having multiple front ends done in various stacks. So, what are the current backend options? So, from our discussion with the people from the decoupled world and companies who are doing decoupled project, we noticed that they are using Java, Ruby on Rails, Go, and Node.js for building decoupled application, and of course some legacy application with web services, as I previously explained. So I started to ask myself, do we need Drupal anymore? What could be the role for Drupal in the new decoupled world? Let's look at a bit of the advantages that Drupal has. One of the very first advantages that Drupal has, it is that it has a very flexible content model architecture. We have very good management of vocabularies and taxonomies. We have various options now in core to expose web services, and we have a power management permission system for content. Of course, with the latest initiatives and the approach taken in Drupal 8, we have now very good management of translations, and we have still an active, large, and contributing community. So what I think is that Drupal can be the powerhouse for the backend in the new decoupled world. What are the obstacles for Drupal in achieving that? One of the first things that I've noticed when I discuss with developers who are doing decoupled application is that they have the impression that PHP is slow, which, to be fair, was true until PHP 7 has been released, and PHP 7 has came up with really good improvements in terms of performance. Another obstacle that I've identified is that there is a lack of awareness that Drupal could act as a backend. And we still have a highest steep learning curve for using Drupal as a new developer. And we need more openness for the decoupled world. And one of the most important things that developers told me is that they want to be able to quickly bootstrap their project without using the UI that much. And company actually wants that too, to be able to start things as quickly as possible. I want to make a small detour and focus a bit on the personas of a Drupal project. So if you are a company building a Drupal project, or if you are approached to, or you want to build Drupal as a backend system, you are going probably to need a site builder, a front-end developer, a backend, and a content editor. Let's have a look at the role of the site builders in Drupal. Drupal shops rarely wants to hire just site builders. At most of the Drupal shops, site builders are actually developers. And site building in Drupal has a high learning curve. You still need to figure out your way around the interface, how to configure the views, how to put a view in a block, how to create the blocks, how to put menus in blocks, and so on. And if you go on the client side and you make a project, and then you think that your customer can use the site building interface of Drupal to make changes to themselves, you'll find out that clients will start to break the layout in trying to change or site build things. And also, for example, once you deploy your site and you think that the customers will be able to change a photo or a text, you end up being on the receiving call asking the client asking you to change the text or the photo on a page. So I asked myself, what if we kill the site builder in Drupal? And what if we focus less on the Drupal administrative interface and allow Drupals to do what they like most, to write code? What if we reduce the role of the site builder in building Drupal with sites? In order to achieve that, we have to improve the experience for the other actors. So we have to decrease the influence of site builders and put more emphasis on developers' experience and the content editors. In order to move on this, I think that for improving the experience for Drupal developers, we have to extend the functionalities of Drupal console and Drush. If you look at the downloads of Drupal console that has been put up on Drupal.org since 2014, you have about 2 million downloads, and I think that's a very good indicator that Drupal developers like to use console when they're bootstrapping things in Drupal. Another thing that we should do as contributors to the Drupal project is to make Drupal depend less on UI and work, for example, on the initiative that currently exists with config management, make Drupal API first ready, and, for example, add functionalities that will allow developers to create content types or views with JSON files. So we have to not to rely that much on the UI of the system. In terms of tools for content editors, I think we have to improve the editorial experience for content editors to be on par with what users nowadays can obtain from Sitecore, Adobe Experience Manager, Contentful, or Gathered Content. So, my point so far, we live in a JavaScript Renaissance world. Web content management systems market is changing. Decoupled architecture is important for companies. As you have explained, the ability to reuse content is relevant for companies and actually makes sense. Developers want to bootstrap their project faster and rely less on the using of administrative interfaces and focus more on writing the code. And we need to improve the tools for developers and content editors. For that brings us to the point of this presentation and focus on our approach with OpenStory. So our goal is to make Drupal to be the powerhouse behind the backend projects in the decoupled world. So for this, we took a look at the content experience on Drupal versus other CMSs. And based on that research that we've done for the past 1 year, we come up with OpenStory. And OpenStory is an open source Angular administrative interface that aims to improve the editorial experience for content editors. So with OpenStory, you can add an editorial interface to Drupal and in the future to some other CMSs. And that editorial interface offers a dashboard with a user-friendly way for editors to create and edit all forms of digital content on their site. We've created OpenStory with Angular and with Node.js, and it has some really simple and strict functionalities. So basically, OpenStory allows you to create an interface for the content editors only to manage content, manage the comments, manage the users, and manage the media. And when I say manage, I mean add, edit, delete, or unpublish this type of content types or content. Some words about the architecture. So we are actually a decoupled application. So we have a backend, a middleware, and a frontend. Our backend system can be Drupal. In the future can be Contentfully or Gatsby or any other CMSs that are there. And we have a Node.js, which is our middleware, and we have an OpenStory UI that is done in Angular. And all of these, of course, are integrated with web services. Some words about the middleware. So we've identified on the market that there are now CMSs as a service, and I found like a quick search on Google brought up these results. And we have also, of course, the typical open source CMSs that are Drupal and WordPress and some others. And for all of this to be able to work through on the OpenStory, they need a middleware, which is actually acts as an interface. And that middleware is connected to the OpenStory UI. What do you want to use this middleware in the future is, for example, to add functionalities as collaboration. So imagine that you have a Drupal site and you have multiple content editors, and they will be able to edit content in a collaborative way, as well as similar as it happens nowadays with Google Docs. Also, what we want to add is add the ability to do content syndication out of the box between different sites or different platforms. We want to add cognitive services to the content editing part. So basically, you'll be able to add image recognition or content analysis by using, one of the deep machine learning systems that are out there with Google or Microsoft. And we want, of course, to be able to allow integration with media management tools that are being used by those companies who rely on external services for their media management, images collection, and videos. Some of the features of Drupal's of OpenStory: it has a dashboard with widgets for content editors. It allows you to manage content with content translation. It allows you to manage comments, users, and media. And it allows you from the interface to run clear cache and run cron, and it has integration with various services, for example, Google Analytics. So whenever a content editor is editing a piece of content that is present on the page, he can check within the editing page what are the stats for that piece of content that he's editing or reviewing, and that data is read automatically from Google Analytics. Or for example, on the comments, we can use the Google server that I missed the name now, that allows you to make sentiment analysis on a comment and tell you if it's positive, it's hateful, or it's spam type of content. And all these kind of things can be integrated through the UI through the Node.js application. I want to show you some screenshots about the current design and look and feel of the application. This is how content management of the content can be done. There is a hero image that we load automatically based on the image content type, and there are some data that we read. If will be possible in the future, we'll see from Twitter or for Facebook or regarding the sharing activity of that piece of content. This is how we manage the media in the OpenStory, and this is how the dashboard looks like. We put a lot of emphasis on the dashboard because we want to allow the content editors to have access to analytics and data that are relative for their work field in terms of how their content are performing on their site. And of course, from the dashboard, we want to allow the content editor to quickly write a piece of text without navigating the interface. This is how content editing looks like in OpenStory. It has, I would say, heavily influenced by the latest trends in empowering users to edit content. And as I said, we created a collection of widgets for content editors that they can add and swap on the dashboard. And furthermore, based on their activity on the website, we can suggest them to add new widgets on the dashboard. And we have about 32 widgets created for content editors. A few words about security. So we have this structure for this component. So we have Drupal serving as a backend to the Node.js application, the Node.js application connected to the OpenStory. We use REST with OAuth between Drupal and Node.js, and then we use WebSockets with JVI tokens for the layer between Node.js and OpenStory, everything over HTTPS. So if you take OpenStory today and you want to implement it with Drupal, or let's say in a couple of weeks, this is what you need to do. You need to download the OpenStory module from Drupal.org, and that module exposes the content through an authentication layer for the Node.js application. We took the approach to create our own module for that, because when we started working on this project roughly a year ago, there was no plan for or no strategy for implementing JSON API in Drupal. However, in the latest changes and the initiative we have around Decoupled Drupal, we are planning to adopt and change our model and contribute as well to the initiative through supporting JSON API and improving the JSON API integration in Drupal. You need a Node.js application. Currently, the Node.js application is hosted on OpenStory. However, we have a plan to make that portable so that you can download the Node.js application and put it on your premises. And of course, you need the Angular UI, the OpenStory UI. That's public code hosted on GitHub. You can download that from GitHub. You can fork it, you can change it, and you can put it on your server. And what you, the only thing that you need to do is activate the module on the Drupal side, and you have an out-of-the-box experience. You don't have to manage users differently. All the users that can be authenticated to the Drupal as content editors, and that's a role that you can mark in the module, will be able to authenticate on the OpenStory UI with the same permission level that they have on the Drupal site and manage the content through the interface. Currently, we have an alpha version. The alpha version has content management functionalities for 7 field types out of 14 field types that we have identified in Drupal. It has the ability to list content, comments, users, and media. It has a dashboard functional with 6 out of the 32 widgets that we have designed as possible, and offers you the ability to add, edit, and change the content. We are now working on the beta version that will be available towards the end of the month, and that will extend our implementation or coverage of fields to 14 out of the possible field types. We'll have 16 of the 32 widgets available, and as well as full comments, users, and media management functionality. Regarding media management, what I mean by that currently is that we are loading the site default files, images, and files that we find there, and we display them in the interface in a graphical way. For version 1, we target to add run cron, run clear functionality, as well as coverage for 1 or 2 other CMS. And for version 1, that our target goal on the roadmap is to have that functional before Drupal Europe. And for version 2, we are going to have all of version 1, but we are going to add content collaboration, Elasticsearch, some integration of content services, for example, image recognition from the Microsoft cognitive services, and maybe sentence analysis on comments, and that will be available later on this fall. I want to make a quick demo on the actual application. So there is this URL that you can use, demo v2openstory.io. Bit of resolution problem. It's not going to help. Something is not working. Sorry for that. So you probably has been logged out for a reason it's unknown for me. So I'm going to go back to the presentation. So you can take a photo of this URL, and there is a username and password there, and there is also more information on the openstory.io, and also there is the source code on GitHub. And of course, do you have any questions? Questions? Yes. So the question is it easy to style the administrative UI? That's a very good question. So we've used Angular components for the administrative application. The application is done using the Angular community coding standards, and there, because Angular has an approach more like MVC, model view controller, there is a separation between the layout and the modeling of the application. So technically, you will be able to style and change the look and feel of the application, and that's not tied to any of the functionality in the back. So I would say yes, and there is going to be documentation on how that can be done on openstory.io. Yes? What? Yeah, so the question is how we are managing paragraphs. So when you are editing a content, if that content has a paragraph, we are able to read the entities and paragraph configuration from the content modeling, and we are going to style that in the interface in the form. One of the reasons that we've we relied on our own implementation of a module to expose the services and not using Drupal REST API or the JSON API for the moment, is that we are hooking on all the modules that are have an action before or after saving a content. So we are reading the whole configuration, and we are passing that through all the hooks through our module. So if you have a module that is making any change to the field or to a paragraph and adds a condition that is in the code, we are capturing that through the module, and we are giving you a response back in the interface if there is an error before save, and if that error has been checked by a module or a flag. So I would say yes, we are showing the paragraphs in the front end, and actually what ties up to for the moment is the ability to display all type of fields that can be embedded in the paragraphs or in the content type. So currently we support 7 out of I think 14 possible field types that we have discovered in the in the Drupal content model. Yes. Yes. Yeah, it's responsive. Maybe it's my IP or cookie or something that. Yeah, trying to. Yeah, live demo is always problematic. Yes.
So we thought that there's a middleware which is built in Node.js is part of the stack that you're
Yes.
developing. Is that kind of a standard that could be implemented by something else than Node.js? Can it be responsible by, let's say, I write a Java version of it or something?
So the question was that if for the stack that we presented, the Node.js implementation is required, or can another stack can be implemented. So what we plan for this is to have a documentation on the services that the front end is using, the OpenStory UI is using, so that if you want to have different middleware, or if you want to expose directly your content to the OpenStory UI and not use the Node.js, you'll be able to write your own implementation of the middleware. So we are not going to tie that for anybody. but have to document on what are the web services that are needed by the OpenStory UI, so that you can write your own middleware, or maybe skip the middleware and go for one stack approach from the backend directly to the OpenStory UI. Yes, yeah, collaborative edition, and actually it's our sauce to integrate it with the other CMSs in the future. Question?
So the main goal of this is to enhance the editorial experience, so allow people, content creators, to create content properly. So what do you plan to do with the platform then? So I fill it with content. So is the platform also serving the content in different ways, or is just a platform to export the content to third-party services? What is the future?
So the question was, is the platform going to be used to export content to other services, and is it going to store content, or is that correct? Okay, so the answer is that we focus on the open stories to improve solely the content experience for these CMSs. As I've said, I think in Drupal, the content experience for Drupal, the editorial part of the content experiences lacks and needs some improvements. And our approach was to create an interface that you don't have to deal with menu, you don't have to deal with configuration, you have to deal with content types. You offer to your content editors just the access to the functionality they need to do content creation. Of course, in the future, that can be extended. So as I said, we have a plan for content syndication. So if you have multiple sites, you will be able to publish the content from one site to another site and do this kind of functionality. That's on our roadmap, but it's not yet implemented. I'm still struggling to log in, so I'm not sure that is going to work. Any other questions? Yes. So the question was how is this interface going to handle all different integration or extensions of functionalities that are added by modules in Drupal, such as content moderation and some other feature that we are probably going to miss in the interface. So I want to say from the start is that the interface is solely for content editing. So we are not going to support layout building, we are not going to support in-place editing. Those are things that I think are functionalities that are done by site builders and are going to stay on the Drupal side, or on various implementation that are going to be done on the Drupal side, such as React Initiative and some other things that I've seen on the market. Our focus for the OpenStory is solely on the editorial part, and currently we support workflows. So for example, if your content has a workflow in place, that workflow is going to be available in the interface. Furthermore, as I've said, if there is any module that let's say interact with your content through hooks, either edit, save, and delete, we capture that information that that module is sending for. So for example, if you add an additional filter, such as a pre-process for making sure that the VAT number is actually a VAT number, and if your module triggers an error, that error will be propagated to the interface. So that functionality is kind of covered. In terms of content moderation and that initiative that exists on content moderation, I don't have an answer. I have to check that out. Yes? Demo works? It seems to work to everybody, only not to me. Okay, 4 more questions and the demo. Let's. it worked for me as well. So yeah, sorry for the resolution. I'm not very good at managing this. So the users will be able to manage and change the widgets on the dashboard and add and change more widgets. This is how the content loading happens, and you can edit and you can view the content type. And whenever there is a field that is not supported, currently there is this message. All the other fields that are implemented will be displayed. These are the comments that we load from the Drupal. There is the media, there is the users that are with all the information regarding them. And if you want to create content, you have this functionality here, and basically this is how it looks like if you are editing or changing content in the OpenStory interface. Your question, Mika?
Yeah, first one, is there a Docker container or something so that I can quickly test on my machine?
Not for the moment, but it will be. We plan to add like a quick demo or bootstrapping from the OpenStory interface. For the moment, no. For the moment, you just have the OpenStory UI on GitHub, and you will need to use our Node.js implementation, but we are going probably until Drupal Europe to be able to download that, and you don't need to use it through our website.
Okay, then three questions kind of grouped together. So what kind of team you are having developing this? What's the licensing model? I forgot the third one.
Okay, so the question was, what is the licensing model and what's the theme that we are used, right? Okay, so the theme, it's something that it has been created by our designers, and we base that on the research of the other CMSs. And regarding the licenses, GPL v2, I think right now. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. So. Please don't forget to rate the session, and if you have any other question or feedback, you can feel free to approach me after the presentation. Thank you.